said it's open again.
We didn't do the one I was telling you. When I got there,
She needs to now.
do it at the
She
end.
knows what it is.
So
Now
that
is
is
the heavy stuff that's still there. So now she's ready. No, she's ready. Yeah, she, now, so.
just send it in my car. So Sunday says we're not doing that. So it's printed. And then we're moving on. Yes.
May I join you?
At the end, just
A reading from Psalm 46 as we begin this morning. God is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, and though the waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult. Come, behold the works of the Lord. The Lord is great and kind. He makes wars to cease and the end of the earth. Oh, come and let us worship and bow down. Be still, and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. But I need to get on with the show. So much to do, so much to say. I just don't have time to waste away the limited hours in this good day. I don't have time to wait and wait. I need to be first to get through that gate, or someone else will take my place, and I can't afford to lose this race. My reputation is on the line, so I regret. But there is no time to sit around and wait to know, now or never. Time for the show. It was no suggestion the harried man heard. Probably wiser to hear God's word as a summons, not an emotional plea. Be still and know. And then you will see the deeper meaning of this moment in time, how life comes together, how the words rhyme and make perfect sense to one who will wait. Be still and know it's never too late. Pull up a chair, contemplate. Well, we're going to do some of that today. Good morning. How nice to see you today. Good morning to these two stragglers who just walked in. Two pastors are always late getting to places like this, but that's all right. We won't make a public spectacle of you any more than we have. My name's Roger Pierce, and I'm glad that you're here today. Thanks for coming back, if you were here last time. If you weren't, you're in for a big shock. I'm delighted to be here and to spend some of the morning with you. This is episode number 2, second conversation of 6 conversations, all focused around prayer in our lives corporately and in our lives individually. Focused really because we're focusing now as a congregation on the Lord's Prayer. Did you know that? If you were in church Sunday, you know who preached Sunday, by the way. Tim Nybrotten, you've heard of him. And I suspect it was an excellent sermon focusing on the Lord's Prayer. And out of that focus for 6 weeks, I was asked if I would come over and help you occupy your Wednesday morning and think about some alternative forms of prayer. Genuine, honest-to-goodness prayer, some that goes way back in our tradition and heritage, but an alternative form to that which we normally experience in the church and even in our personal lives. And so I'm going to talk about today, and I hope we have time at the end to do a little exercise together. We'll see how time goes, if I don't talk too much and too long. And I'm already way past time, I think. The Lord's Prayer is a spectacular model because it helps us to see in the first half the essence of God, hallowed be thy name, kingdom come, will be done. And in the second half, it has to do with human beings. It is simple and profound. It is concerned with the nature of God and the nature of human beings. Daily bread, forgiveness, facing temptations. Those are essentially human issues that you and I deal with all the time. But the most important thing about this prayer is that it opens the door to an intimate relationship with God. Our Father is the way it begins. And those 2 words, our Father, carry critical meaning for the followers of Jesus. Not only that, but essential for our understanding of what prayer is about. Our, not my. Our is a very important word. There is no exclusivity here. Our makes us think of family in a very large way. Our Father, not just mine or my. And Father, of course, the word suggests an intimacy of caring and compassion and guidance. So the Lord's Prayer is unique and critical to our faith. And last week I placed the Lord's Prayer in what I called a category of verbal prayer. That is, words formed either on the lips or in the heart, words spoken. Traditional prayer, whether in the church service or in our personal devotions, is almost all words spoken and delivered from us. That is, sometimes with verbal prayer, I ask and God gives. I speak, God listens. I inform, and I teach God something that presumably God didn't know. God didn't know that Aunt Sally was in the hospital last week, so I had to be sure and tell God that happened. It's just strange. And I'm not trying to be flippant. I talk and God listens. And many Christians, I think today, really wish for a communication with God that is more relational, something that interacts, perhaps at a deeper spiritual level than just verbal prayer. Now hear me clearly. I'm not saying do not talk to God. Don't go tell the pastors that I said that. I'm not proposing we do away with verbal prayer. We have to do that because that's the way we formulate prayer. It has its place in our spiritual lives, but I'm saying it's not the only alternative. There are other possibilities, and that's what I want to come at today as we talk about something called walking prayer, walking prayer. I bet that's probably the next slide, sure enough. And that's what we're here about today. Are there other ways we can encounter God? Are there alternative ways to engage God? And the answer is yes. And those ways have been around forever. Long, long, long centuries, all the way back and even preceding Jesus. Let me show you one today. I'm going to demonstrate one, and you're going to help me to demonstrate it, I hope. First, though, it's probably a good idea to say again that contemplation is not a dirty word. Don't let it fool you. Don't let it scare you. It is simply resting in the lap of God, in the arms of God, resting. It's been practiced by Christians for centuries, long, long eons of time. One writer puts it, contemplation becomes prayer when we open our eyes and our hearts not simply to the world that surrounds us, but to the God who is in that world and through it and over it and under it, who dwells in us. Contemplation, and therefore contemplative prayer, is based on one fundamental principle of Christian spirituality. God is not a distant figure. God is here. God is now. God is in this moment, in and through everything that we experience. One does not have to seek God or to find God, because God reaches out to us in everything if we become aware of that and participate in it. We just have to wake up. We just have to open up and wise up and become aware that we are steeped in God. Another commentator puts it like this: contemplatives are ordinary people who are extraordinarily conscious of the impelling life of God, both within them and around them. But our awareness of this reality is so limited. And I think it's true, she writes, because we have been trained to pray instead of being trained in prayer. That's a powerful statement. Now let me put this next statement in parentheses. It's kind of a disclaimer. If you don't get this, what I'm talking about, if this doesn't sink in, if it doesn't connect with you, please don't go running out of here alarmed or saddened or frightened. If you are a person who is really committed to verbal prayer, God bless you. Keep at it. Do it. It's so important to connect in any way possible with this great other that we know. If you wish for something more, let me tell you about a form of contemplative prayer that's called prayer walking prayer. I cannot tell you who it was long, long ago, but I'd like to shake the person's hand who decided to use his or her walking time, not just to get from point A to point B, but as a time to have conversation with life, nature, with God. Because Jesus walked everywhere, I suspect. Maybe he rode on the back of a donkey once in a while, but he walked for the most part everywhere he went. And I'm confident that in that walking time, he experienced a dialogue with God everywhere he went. I believe that everything Jesus saw or smelled or tasted or touched or held in his hand as he went from one village to another revealed something about God, expressed something about God. His spirit linked up with God and they talked about everything and anything. God literally walked with Jesus. And my friends, it is exactly the same way today. The same possibility exists if our hearts will open to that. The goal of Christian life, you see, is not being good. The goal of Christian life is not doing good. The goal of a Christian life is to be Christ in the world, to be the living presence of God in everything we experience. So I want to encourage you to risk what might seem like the ridiculous. Lay aside the formalities to the extent that you are able and willing. This is a friend who walks beside you every day, a friend. This is a confidant, an advisor. This is an encourager. And I want you to try something that maybe you've never tried before. I want you to think about the possibility of walking full time, consciously with God everywhere you go. Here's how it might work. When the sun is just coming up over the Catalinas, I slip into my walking clothes and I'm out the door for my everyday exercise walk. My doctor said, get out there and walk. It's good for you. Your doctor ever told you that? Walking is good for you. I believe him. I try to do it. Before my Nikes hit the sidewalk and I get up to speed, I turn on my pedometer. You know, you have to get those, 10,000 steps? You have to have that so you can tell your neighbor you did it. As if I'm accountable to my neighbor for 10,000 steps. Before I get to that point, as I'm just beginning, I might say a verse or two of Scripture that pops into my mind, or one that I've thought about to say, to kind of get the context flowing inside me. Maybe it's a psalm, something that welcomes the morning. Maybe I hum a familiar hymn. You've grown up in the church. If you have, you're like me, and I know the lyrics to 60 million hymns. Sometimes I need to go back and refresh myself a little bit on exactly the tune or the meter and so forth. But I remember one called "For the Beauty of the Earth, for the Glory of the Skies, for the beauty of the earth." That's a lovely song. So I hum that to myself as I start out. Or, "When morning gilds the skies, my heart awaking cries, let Jesus Christ be praised." What a good way to start a walk, because you're intentionally beginning that walk as a spiritual exercise and setting the context. So I want to do something that sets that context and opens my sleepy mind even a little bit to the waiting presence of God, waiting for me to show up. So out the door on the street, my mind inclined toward the sacred nature of the moment, and I say, "Good morning, Lord. Here I am, and here you are, and here we are. I just want to walk beside you for a little while. I just want to walk with you and fully and completely be in your presence." Now, here's the best part. Everything you see and hear, everything you smell or touch begins to reveal, little by little, convey perhaps is another word, the reality of God in that moment. Because you've moved from just physical exercise, walking, to an experience of everything around you that begins to broadcast the nature of the spiritual. You're entering prayer. This is wonderful, wonderful prayer. So I say to God, what a beautiful sunrise, Lord. What a beautiful sunrise. And I thank you for it. And those gorgeous clouds in the sky, monsoon season, and those big billowing beautiful clouds. Thank you. And you notice as you're walking along, traffic is getting a little heavier. And you say to yourself, I want to pray for everybody that's going by in that car. And I don't know who they are, but I'm going to pray for them, for their day and for their blessing. The man sitting on the street corner with that cardboard sign, he becomes a revealing of something about the spiritual nature of who I am in reference to God. You and God see and feel the man's despair. And a hawk flies over, and an ambulance roars by with a siren wailing, and you turn down a residential street, and you and God bless each house, each home. Don't know who lives in those places, but you know how family life can be sometimes. Pretty testy. And so walking along, you become walking prayer. Do you see what's happening? everything you encounter is intentionally touched by the sacred walking by. Your prayer projected to a distant God is now vibrant and alive, and your senses are alert, and you feel the emotion of the moment. This is prayer. This is prayer. And because of the walk, your body is refreshed and you're made healthier. True. And your mind is focused and your heart is softened and your spirit is enlivened. I dare you to try it for a week. Just try it. Intentionally now. Don't just kind of stumble into it, but you really have to do it intentionally. So, that's what I would like to do when I take my daily walk. But, you know, there is more. And I think there's a slide, Luke, that shows a labyrinth. You know what a labyrinth is? Anybody ever seen a labyrinth before? I don't know where this one is, but it's a colorful one, isn't it? A labyrinth is a wonderful prayer invitation. And if you don't know, I will just probably inadequately describe that it's a circle, as you can see in the slide. There's an entry point on the exterior ring. In this case, it looks like it's at the top of this one. See that little opening up there? And so if I'm going to walk in a labyrinth as a prayer exercise, I'm going to come to that opening in the labyrinth. And I probably am going to say, Lord, here I am. I am coming to you. Because the goal is the center of that circle. Way down in the very center. That's where you're going to walk slowly. And so I start to walk around the outside ring, and it slowly moves to the next little ring, and the next little ring, and the next one, until after slowly walking and praying, perhaps again reciting scripture or humming a little song or something that is careful to bring us more and more into the present. We're getting deeper and deeper into the center of life and into the presence of God. And upon arriving at that center point, I'm going to stand there for a moment and take in the absolute amazing grandeur of being at the very center of God in my spirit. And then I'm going to turn around and walk out the same way I came in, slowly, moving back into life, back into the world, back into the things that I take for granted every day, back into the common reality. So, people walk labyrinths everywhere. How many of you, I'm just curious, have ever walked a labyrinth? Oh, so many of you. You don't even need the explanation. But you know the power of it if you've done it regularly. I like to ride a bicycle, and when I ride sometimes on the wonderful Tucson Loop, there is a place, and I can't really remember exactly where, I could probably find it again, where somebody has built a big labyrinth just off the trail. You can tell it's handmade. Rocks are kind of positioned around. And somebody has been thoughtful enough to create this marvelous prayer adventure that pulls you off the bicycle and says, come and walk. Come and be a part of this experience. And they could be made out of stone or logs or anything like that. Anybody have a story about a labyrinth? Any experience that you'd like to share? Think about your experience, though, and look for the possibility of continuing that practice. I wonder where the nearest labyrinth is. Anybody know where the nearest labyrinth is located? Right out the door. My goodness. Did you know that? There's one right out the door. No excuse for not walking the labyrinth and seeing what that feels like. But let me say to you, like anything that may be a new experience, don't just try it once and say, okay, I did it. Didn't feel any different. It really takes development over time and intention in any of these prayer forms to make them a very significant part of your life. So whether you are in your neighborhood or at a nearby labyrinth location, you and God can have a nice walk together and talk and experience. Pour out your heart Share your own pain and sorrow with God. Open yourself up. Bless everything and everyone you experience along the way. Make your intercessions for others who are in difficulty. Rejoice, be thankful, whatever the emotional moment is as you share that time with God. Let your eyes see and your heart feel the pulsing of life as you walk with God. Marcus Borg, the late Marcus Borg, was a very instrumental person in many people's spiritual lives, a wonderful writer, Episcopal priest. And I saw one time where Borg said the way he expresses his welcome for God every morning as a spiritual exercise, as a form of prayer, is to stand and raise his arms and say, I receive, Lord, from you, and I take into myself, and I give back to the world. What a simple experience of putting myself into the context of prayer. That's prayer also, as much as the spoken word. I receive from God, I take to myself, I give to the world. Now, for you who are rational, analytical folks, here's a list of key advantages. You want a list? Here's a list. You have to have a list of key advantages to doing what I've just described. 6 reasons why you should follow my advice. Number 1, it's a stress reducer. That's what they tell us. It reduces stress. To do an exercise like this, a walking prayer or some other form of spiritual exercise. It's an encouragement for your mind to see what you usually don't see. When I walk, sometimes my head's down and I'm going straight ahead and I don't see things around me, but when I walk slowly, intentionally to be with God, then I begin to see things that have always been there, but I've just never noticed them before. Emotional well-being, they say that's another benefit. Physical exercise, of course, and do a little problem solving as you go along. There are lots of reasons that you could, if you need a list of reasons, I can give them to you. Or what about these suggestions from a person who knows about prayer walking? Here's a suggestion. Choose your route so that you'll be comfortable with your walk. That sounds like common sense, doesn't it? Choose your route. Probably I'm not going to wander off into some strange, bizarre place. I want to be in a place that is somewhat familiar, my neighborhood or a park or someplace. Pray silently or aloud as you walk. Would it bother you to speak aloud as you're walking along in a prayer walk? It shouldn't, because when I go through Fry's or Safeway, half of the people are talking to themselves over these things stuck in their ears that I can't see. And I look around, did you say something to me? What? No. You can pray silently. You can pray aloud if the spoken word is important. Be observant. Look for those things that want to reveal themselves to you, the nature and essence of God, that have always been there, but perhaps never been seen clearly. And for goodness sakes, do not wear one of those A-frame signs that says, look at me, I'm praying. That's tacky. Don't do that. Don't do that. No. In another time and place, I knew some people who modified their prayer walking, and they turned it into what they called crisis prayer, but it has something to do with the same idea. In that community, and those people that I knew, when there was a serious accident, for instance, if there was a fatality in a car crash or intense human suffering, they would meet at the site of the accident when it was appropriate. It might be the next day, it might be a following week, could be a month later, and they would gather together and stand shoulder to shoulder on that spot, and they would pray together, not with signs or banners, not placards for people to see. They would pray for the one injured, for the community, for the first responders. They targeted the pain of the time and the moment, and they went there to be a revealing element for everybody else about God's love. What a beautiful thing to do, to sacrifice oneself in time and effort to pray where there has been serious pain and suffering. Begin by just walking through your own neighborhood slowly so that you can saturate your community with prayer. May peace be upon you and in this house and all who live there, and then the next house, and then the next house. Maybe somebody's doing that for your home and you don't even know it. But what a wonderful thing it is to engage practically the presence of God in this kind of experience. Pray for each car that passes by, each worker out there in the street fixing the potholes. Pray for them. For the businesses you pass, everything becomes an opportunity to give oneself to prayer, because God is there, waiting for us to be the agents of the revealing. By the way, if you happen to go past any churches, Luke, in our slides today? Oh, look, there's one. If you happen to go by a church, bless that church and pray for the pastors and the leaders and the ministry that goes on there. Lord knows those of us in the church, all of us, need the passing prayers of as many people as possible. When you walk is not important. You pick the time, best time suited for you. Maybe a morning walk, might be early morning, or it might be sometime later in the day. If you prefer the cool of the evening, go for it. And it's entirely up to you. Years ago, when I worked in downtown Indianapolis, Indiana, I used my lunch break to walk along the White River that flows through the city of Indianapolis. Another recommendation, many times we need to slip into the prayer mood or mode because of so many other things pressing for our attention. Prepare your mind and your heart for this devotional practice. Don't just walk into it in a hurry. If you have a favorite Bible passage, as I've said, sit with those passages for a few minutes before you start. A song, a hymn, a spiritually oriented book, an article to read. Maybe it's just sitting in silence for a few minutes, collecting your thought and opening yourself as much as possible to the presence of God. And this you see tells your mind something. It says, I'm shifting gears. I'm moving out of the ordinary expectations, and I'm entering a sacred place where God and I can be together. Last suggestion, end your walk with saying thank you. Be sure to say thank you. Grateful discovery is what you've been about. Say thank you and let your own gratitude just pour out. Be thankful for the spiritual discoveries you have made in the walk, for the companionship you have shared personally with God. For the sunrise, thank you. For the laughter that I hear in the distance, thank you. For the little ground animals that scurry across my path, thank you. For the mountains and the trees and the saguaros and the cloud formations, everything you see is a gift given to you while you're walking with the creative mystery that made all of these things and holds them together. When you let your awareness, your consciousness come to life, you literally come to life with it, and that is prayer. So I have an idea. I don't know how you're going to agree with this, but it's my idea, so I'm going to share it with you. Let's do it. Let's do it. I'm going to propose that we try this right here and now. Here's how it's going to. Here's the possibility. If you don't want to do this, perfectly okay. I'm going to offer us about 10 minutes, 15 at the most. And at that signal, I would invite anybody who wants to, number one, to stay where you're seated if you don't want to participate in this walking experience. And just use that as a quiet time of your own personal reflection where you're seated. But others of us, if you want to get up and just walk. And we have set the context, I hope, for the walking. And so if I'm going to walk slowly around the room, separated somewhat from you so I don't have the inclination to turn around and say, what are we having for lunch today? I'm going to walk around and I'm going to be conscious of everything around me, like that musical note up there. And it makes me think about the glory of music in the life of the church and in my personal life, and I'm thankful for that. And if I walk over this way and I see those banners over there, redeemed by grace, that makes me think of something else. God is revealing God's self little by little through all of these things. All of these things, the baptistry, the candle, the musical instruments, this stand from which speakers bring the word to us, those chairs where the choir, everything begins to offer itself as a possibility. And you have prayed. That's legitimate, honest prayer. And it is so refreshing then to know at the end of that experience, all of life as I walk through it, when I leave this place and go through the parking lot and I get in my car and I'm doing every moment of the day offers itself as a possibility. Will you try it with me for a few minutes? I'll leave it up to you to decide if you want to, and that's okay. If you don't, it's perfectly all right. I spring it on you unannounced, so that's probably not fair. I've got a little bell up here. It sounds like this. And the next time you hear that bell, it means, would you kind of come back to where you're planted there in your seats, and then we will conclude with some final thoughts. But for the time being, for the next 10 minutes or so, just get up and move anywhere you want to. Inside, outside, doesn't matter. I'll come find you if you can't hear the bell out there. Walk and pray. Let's do it. Let's do it. Amen and amen. You didn't know you were going to have to work so hard when you came today. But it's so important. It's such a wonderful, rich experience if you are inclined toward this kind of revealing and awareness. And if you're a person who can take this, make it your own experience of walking anywhere at any time, but always knowing that everywhere you go, there's waiting to be revealed to you something of the sacred. And if you have that as your mindset, the sacred is everywhere and waits for me to walk into it and to be aware of it, then life takes on a whole different aspect, I think. Lord knows we have enough to scare us these days. We need enough now to find the sacred dimension, and this is one way to do it. Anybody want to make any comment about what you did or how you felt about doing it, or any sorrow that you came today to? Try it. Just give it a chance. Some of us are very, and I'm one of them, I'm a very rational, logical type person. And it's taken a long time for me to be able to develop, with the help of God's grace, some capacity to understand the beauty and richness of this kind of spiritual expression. I hope you'll do the same thing and work at it. Sunday morning last, I went on a hike. I think I've told you, or maybe you know, that my wife Sue and I have moved not too long ago over on the west side of town to the town of Marana. We live in a 55-plus age group, 3-story apartment building called Album. It's a very nice place. It's new and it's almost filling up now. And one of the new occupants, new residents, is a woman who loves birds. She's an authority on birds. You can whistle like any kind of bird and she can tell you what it is. You know, she is experienced and in love with nature. And so about a month ago, she said to several of us, "Would you like to go on a birding walk?" And I said, "Sure. I've never been on one, so I'll try it." And so about 5 or 6 of us got together early on a Sunday morning, and we went to a place called Sanctuary Cove. Maybe you've been there. There's a lovely loop trail about 3 miles, and you can encounter a lot of bird sounds. So as we walked along this trail, she would hear a bird and she would say, "That's a you know what," and she would describe it. We all got educated. At my point in life, I get little aches and pains once in a while, unlike you young folk. And on this trip, this hike, this past Sunday morning, the 5 or 6 people were up in the foyer there, and I was back here. I was kind of going slower and slower because I was beginning to experience some discomfort in my right hip. Not bad, but enough that it slowed me down. And once in a while they would look back just to make sure I was still in the vicinity. They were kind enough to do that. As I walked along, I thought, my hip hurts. I'm getting old. I'm tired. Why do I do this? My pain, it was all about me and my pain. And it, just like that, something transitioned. And pain became the segue, the bridge from myself to the pain of the world and the pain and suffering of other people. And I thought, pain is everywhere. God knows pain. God has experienced pain in many ways, and we experience it. And so my pain became a much more universal feeling of an awareness of and a concern for the pain of other people. Now, I don't say that to pat myself on the back, But it has come with time to develop spirituality to the point where things like that become little channels to something greater. When you walk and you experience great joy in your life or something, or disappointment, let those emotions be the channels that broaden out so that you experience that for everything around you, because God is communicating that way to us. My pain reminded me of the suffering of the world. Didn't make my hip feel any better, but it was a revealing. That's what this walking stuff is all about. I entrust it to you. I encourage you to give it a try. If you choose to come back next week, we're not going to talk about prayer walking, but prayer as imagination. It's a wonderful, wonderful way of thinking about prayer using human imagination. It's an intriguing idea. I want to finish with a little meditation called Walking Prayer. Sunlight crept over the mountain ridge, and I turned in my bed. Just one more hour, and then I'll rise and greet the day, refreshed, renewed, with physical power to do the tasks that must be done. Conference calls, the executive team, fly to Boston to make a speech. But for now, just let me dream. Well, 1 hour later, the alarm called my name, and I peeked past the curtain, hoping for rain, but the sky was clear and the sun was bright. A brilliant day replaced the night, and then it struck me just out of the blue. I'll lace up my Nikes, and I'll walk into this day. Thank you, God, for the restful night. Hear my prayers. I have so much to say. I will pray as I walk through my neighborhood. For each home I pass, all the people inside. For flowers and mountains, the kid on the bike, for the bus that passes. For love that abides in all living things as a gift of your grace. For the beautiful smile on that old man's face. Today I pray as I take my walk. Today the Lord and I have a talk about what it means to follow the way. What a blessing it is to start the day with thanks and praise and simple talk as together the Lord and I take a walk. You ever walk along streets or trails? Well, the next time you do, take a friend along. Sing from your heart a Thanksgiving song. Talk about life, the good and the bad. He's the best friend you've ever had. Pour out your heart as you walk and pray. What a glorious way to start the day. I commend this to you for your spiritual growth and development. And I thank you very much for being here today and sharing the idea with me. What you do with it is entirely up to you, but I bless you on your way. And now you may walk. Thank you for being here today. Thank you. Next Wednesday, same time, same place. Hope to see you then. God bless. Thank you.